Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of The Owner's Box After Dark. I am your host, Mark Farinella, the former assistant sports editor, Patriots beat writer, sports columnist, and most bankable employee of a daily newspaper in southeastern Massachusetts. 41 years tenure. Now retired, now podcasting, now enjoying life. And this is episode 46. And it is being recorded on May 4th, a Tuesday night, 2021. And I think I have a little bit of a treat for you tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about a topic that interests me more than it used to. Quite a bit more, in fact. Probably because I dabble in it now a little bit. We're going to talk about the future of pro sports broadcasting and looking at it from the perspective of what the pandemic has done to it and what is being done to kind of get it back to normal. In fact, tonight, it marks one of the first nights that the Boston Red Sox television broadcasting crew has actually broadcasted a game from Fenway Park in Boston. Dave O'Brien, Jerry Remy, and Dennis Eckersley are working out of the broadcast booth at Fenway tonight instead of where they've been for almost a full year, which has been the Nesson Studios, the New England Sports Network in Watertown, Massachusetts. They did all of their telecasts from the shortened season last year and up to this point of this year from the studio, sitting behind a desk, surrounded by plexiglass, so they would be socially distanced and protecting themselves from possible COVID-19 infection. And they never went on the road, and I don't think that's in the cards yet for them this year. But that is the deal that they've been dealing with. And now finally, as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is starting to loosen its restrictions on broadcasting, on outdoor activities, on dining, on all sorts of things, this is where now they can finally go back to Fenway Park and do the games live. Now, I don't know what the routine is for live broadcasts from outside of New England. I don't think that's in the cards yet, as I said. But somebody who knows a lot about this is a fellow that I've known for a long time, and his name is Ray Martel. He is the executive producer of New York Mets radio broadcasts for WCBS in New York City. And he's been working Mets games for quite a while, previously at WOR in New York, and then prior to that in a slightly different role for WFAN. So Ray is a Bishop Feion High School alumnus, and he is from Pawtucket, Rhode Island originally, and he and I have actually shared, even though I'm considerably older than Ray, we've shared some experiences on the way up, and starting in local radio and getting a start with high schools and doing things in the high school in kind of a broadcasting sense. And he went to college to do something entirely differently, but got pulled into this. And on his way up, he interacted with other people from our area here who had big positions at these stations that he worked at. So I don't go into a lot of the history yet, but if you want to listen to our full interview, you can listen to episode 36 of The Owner's Box, the original gangsta of these podcasts. It's my audio-only podcast. It's available on almost all of the popular podcasting platforms, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon has them now, iHeartRadio.com, you name it, they've got it. So take a chance on it. Take a listen if you want to hear the entire interview. But I figured I'd focus here for the video version, which we did do on Skype. We actually will have the split screen this time, something I finally got to work. It's been a while for me to get that to work. We're going to talk mostly about the actual execution of these things and what the future may hold. And so we'll get into that topic in depth. And And I think we'll use about probably 30-plus minutes of what was a 50-minute interview. So, like I said, check out my podcast for my audio podcast for the other parts of it. And I think you're going to enjoy what you're going to see here. First, though, a little bit of housekeeping. Yesterday was my first mowing Monday of the season. Yes, that's the day I usually devote to mowing my yard. And some of you probably remember, because I've talked about it incessantly, that I had knee surgery last August. And because I had all sorts of issues with my knees, I couldn't do much of the mowing that I had to do in this yard last year. So it was frustrating. It cost me more to get it done by somebody, by the landscapers that usually work on my yard for the bigger projects. But, I need to do it. I need to get out there. I'm not ready for being an elderly person yet, even though I am 67 years old. I feel younger. I want to stay younger, and I need the exercise, and I want to mow my own yard, even though it was, when I was in my teens, that was the last thing I wanted to do. I mean, my parents, God rest their souls, they could tell you stories about my convulsive sneezing, which they thought I was faking, and I wasn't, because I was incredibly allergic to all this stuff, but I could handle it. So, and now that I own the property, I want to keep it looking nice, so I have a nice lawnmower, and so yesterday was the first mowing Monday, and I think it came about 2 weeks later than last year. I think, and if I remember rightly too, because last year in April was the day that I actually hurt my knee, or actually aggravated the existing injuries to it, to the point where I knew I was going to have surgery at some point. So I got through yesterday. It's barking a little bit. I can feel it. I had to do it slowly with pauses and all that. But usually I cheer myself up during the process by singing or humming a little tune to myself, which I've written, and I'm not going to sing it for you because you don't want to hear my singing voice. But it's to the tune of the Bangles' Manic Monday. Now, at this point, I would probably normally play a few bars of it. Find a recording somewhere and play a few bars of it here. If you don't know the song, because it does stem from quite a few years back. But, just another manic Monday. Okay, that's as much as I even dare to say here, because let me explain something. For those of you not familiar with copyright law, I can't use copyrighted music without the permission of the copyright owner, which is why my opening theme and some of the music here, if it isn't in the public domain, some of the music I use here is what they call unlicensed music. It's stuff that I can get from all sorts of sources. It's from even Universal Studios has a clearinghouse for it. And I get all sorts of great stuff that fits beautifully. Now, I can use something like Go You Northwestern, which I do on occasion, because it's out there for your use. Nobody complains about that. But for last week, in the last episode I did prior to this one of the Owner's Box after dark, I was actually sent a notice by YouTube that saying that I had violated a copyright. And of course I was astounded because I don't use copyrighted music in this. I did slip up once, and I'll have to deal with it. Probably have to edit one of my old episodes because I actually used a theme to Peter Gunn, great 50s television show. You would recognize it if I had the courage to hum it right now. But apparently, you might recall that my football broadcast partner for North TV, Glenn Farley, and I recorded an interview before the King Philip Franklin football game at MacTass Field in Rentham. And as we were about 4 minutes into it, all of a sudden the loudspeakers started blaring this incredibly awful music. And of course, we had to try to talk over it because we couldn't stop the interview. We couldn't go anywhere else. All of our North TV equipment was sitting out in the stands, and I wasn't going to leave that to go walking across the field somewhere. So we ducked behind the press box at some point and tried to talk, but you could still hear the music. Now, apparently, we've been accused by the copyright holders of that crappy music that we have violated their copyrights. I'm debating that with them because I want to say that I have fair use of it because it was nothing that I put intentionally into the interview I was conducting. What I was conducting was basically a news event, and this was playing in the background, and I couldn't edit it out. I certainly had no intention of using it, but this crappy music was so loud that apparently and I'm sure it's automated, their automated checkers found it somewhere and alerted them that somebody was using their music. Well, I wasn't using it with any intent. Believe me, if I could have turned it off, I would have. Oh, my God, I would have. One of the songs, the name of it, as I looked it up eventually, was I'm Sorry My Goat Is Dead. Does that tell you something about this music? No, it's not something I wanted to use. So, like I said, I'm fighting it. We'll see what happens about that. But thus, I cannot sing to you Mowing Monday. But just rest assured, it has great lyrics, and if I could just get who is the girl's name? Oh God, I can't remember. Susanna Hoffs. If I could just get her to sing it, boy, that would be terrific. Okay, we now will go on to our interview with Ray Martel, the executive producer of New York Mets radio broadcasts for WCBS Radio 880 on your AM dial in New York City. Ray, welcome to the Owner's Box. While it certainly seems as if we're approaching the final days of the coronavirus pandemic, which by my count has lasted 59 weeks since the emergency was declared, it can't be denied that it changed the way that our society as a whole operates. And the sports world certainly hasn't been immune. In fact, I think pro, college, and high school sports have been affected as much as anyone, from the cancellation of entire seasons at the height of the emergency to lingering effects still seen today. And one guy that has to deal with all those alterations in normal procedures is my guest today. He's Ray Martel, the executive producer of New York Mets broadcasts and the newsroom operations manager for WCBS Radio in New York City. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention right off the top that he is a proud alumnus of Bishop Feion High School in Attleboro. Ray, welcome to the Owner's Box.
Hey, that's a requirement. I need that on everything there. I find a way whenever I do an occasional broadcast here and there. I find some way to drop that in there somehow. But I'm doing very well, Mark. It's awesome to be on with you. It's great to see you doing so well after reading you for so many years. And it's great that we're actually taping this on the night of the NFL draft. So it's one of the few times when you weren't having to run all over to worry about.
I know it. Well, I'm just returning the favor because you had me on a podcast that you were doing for a while, and are you not doing that anymore? You're a pretty busy guy, right?
My mom and dad and Keith's mom and dad, all four listeners, got kind of tired of it, so we stopped at that. Hey, look, you talk about the pandemic. Yeah, things got kind of busy, and we just never had time to continue on. We'd like to get it back up in there, but things kind of got busy, and It's great that both Keith and myself were still full-time working and just didn't have time to do it. If we hadn't have been, we'd be running right back and doing it like we were in the past.
Well, if you ever need me again, let me know. And now that I've got the whole studio set up here, the audio will be better, I can guarantee you. Let's get into what I'm really want to talk to you about. The pandemic, as I've said, has almost totally changed a lot of stuff in this country, and especially the way that radio and TV networks are handling sports broadcasting, ever since the games actually resumed. And I'm a little scared in the back of my mind that some of those changes might become permanent. But the one thing that I notice, and it may not be the case for the Mets, and you can explain to me how they're doing it, but like locally here, Nesson, which handles the Red Sox, they're handling all of their play-by-play calls, everything from their studios in Watertown. So Dave O'Brien, Jerry Remy, and Dennis Eckersley aren't even in their broadcast booth at Fenway for the home games, and they're not doing the road games either. They're all doing it sitting encased in plexiglass with monitors in front of them. I think I'm not sure if they're doing the games at the TD Garden yet, but I know Jack Edwards and Andy Brickley were doing Bruins games the same way. In fact, I had Jack on as a guest here on the Owner's Box, and we talked. This was before the pandemic, and we talked a lot about, what might happen in the game. And I also learned a lot about how he does a game. And he's a guy who likes to do like a radio call, even though it's TV, because he thinks that Bruins fans are a different animal. They like hearing the description that way. And I would have to agree with him. And as someone who dabbled in a little bit of hockey broadcasting this year, which I was horrible at, I know he's the kind of guy who wants to see the whole rink. And the peripheral vision for a guy like him is more important almost than being able to follow the puck. So I got to believe that what he's doing. I haven't talked to him since, but I'll probably make a call up there and see if I can get him back on. But I would have to assume that having the monitor view is frustrating because you cannot see the entire rink. It just isn't for the other guys in the fields. And in the Patriots case, Bob Socci and Scott Zolak did all of their calls of games this year from the broadcast location at Gillette Stadium, right at the number one level there. They did the home games in person, but the road games, they were still sitting in those seats. And I've actually called a game from there. It's a nice view. And they did it off monitors again. And what I'm worried about is, these guys operate on a bottom line oftentimes, your companies, your corporations. And if they're seeing right now that an acceptable product can be put on television or on the radio from not being in person, I wonder if that's going to be something that follows in the future. Do you have any fears about that? And first of all, before you get into that too, talk to me about how the Mets do it. How are you operating the Mets radio broadcast?
Well, you mentioned the what they're doing for the Pats, and I've spoken to Mark Capello a bunch of times. I know him very well, who produces their broadcast, and it's a very similar situation. We're calling Mets home games from home at the park, and we have two separate booths. We're in the main booth and the aux booth to give us some social distancing. So Chris Majkowski, the engineer, is in one booth, and Howie and Wayne are in the other booth, or Howie and Eddie, and they split it up that way, and we call all the games from that booth. When we have an away game, we open the windows up, put some monitors up, and you've got three feeds coming in. And they kind of worked with Sportsnet New York, and you mentioned a name there, and I mentioned the name earlier, SNY. Their boss, who handles everything, is Kurt Gowdy Jr., who I've actually dealt with. So you mentioned Kurt Gowdy, another name there. He runs SNY. But SNY is the one who gets all the video feeds in, and they send it to us. And we have three monitors set up, one that has what's called the world feed. Now, the world feed is what you are calling the game off of, and it's pretty much what you see on television, minus any graphics to kind of be any distraction.
Yeah.
Then we get a large all nine, and that is a zoomed-out camera where you can see all nine players on the field and get an eye of the runners and everything there. And then there's a multi-view with the pitch count, the clock for, which is amazing that baseball's a clock. I hate it, but that's what it is. They have a clock, and then the two bullpens, and then some stadiums put a different thing depending on where you're coming from. But the general thing is you get both bullpens, you get the clock, the scoreboard, and there. So you're calling it off of the world feed, and it can be a little difficult to do and to get used to. And it's definitely not the same feeling as being there at the park. Yeah. But the thing is, if you think about the pandemic and how close we came to not having any sports whatsoever, everybody took it. And we kind of felt that this year would be the same thing. We'd be doing this as well, and we are. Now, as for the future, nobody really knows. I think we're all going to be back. That's our feeling, but that's not my decision to make. That's not what it is. We're going to keep doing it as much as we can in whichever way we possibly can. But this year, Wayne Randazzo, who is a native of Chicago, was actually at Wrigley Field this year for 3 of the games. Howie was at Citi Field calling it. So we've started we had a chance to do a hybrid to kind of see how it would work. There's a lot of technical differences to do each of these things together, and that's part of the consideration too. We could continue this going forward. I don't know if it's going to or not, but if it does, that means Major League Baseball is going to have to produce all of these things. 6 one, half dozen the other. It's really what the question is going to be going forward. Once you get to a point when everybody feels it's safe for us to go out, and that's anyone's decision on their own, decide when they want to, but when they decide that they're ready to go out and Major League Baseball says, okay, you guys can travel, which they've told the radio that they can, And then I think teams will start to travel. Will they be heading over to like a quick 3-game West Coast trip? Maybe that's something that changes in the future. Maybe they don't make that long trip. But again, then you need to have the facility sent over to you, and you're dealing with your RSN to get the video feed and radio. And again, these are all things that we've been doing for the last year and a half. And again, it's worked rather well. Everything sounds good. We've done a good job with it. Howie and Wayne are they're on our station, are very, very big on letting the fans know that, hey, we're here at Citi Field. They're at Wrigley Field. They're at PNC Park. They're in Philadelphia so we keep everybody abreast of that, because whenever there is a case, and it does happen where all of a sudden the TV screen doesn't switch, you can't tell who the runner on second is, and it's just the way it's going to be. But the difference between being in live at the game, there is definitely that. And I think that's what's going to get everybody back out on the road at some point, down at the point when everything is opened up. But they've been very cautious, and I think rightfully so. I think you needed to do what you did last year again this year to start it up. But we're even seeing the fans and everything. We're increasing capacity here in New York in a couple weeks as well. I got my letter from the Craft Sports Group about the Massachusetts decision that they're hoping by August 30th or August 1st, rather, they're going to have everything at 100%. New York City Mayor de Blasio today said he expects New York City to be open on July 1st, back to normal. Hey, look, it's all hoping, and things can go south quickly, as we've seen many times. Some point we'll be back to a normal and back to being at crowded places and everything. And I think you'll have the announcers and TV guys that want to be there. Could I see a case, though, like I mentioned earlier, a West Coast late night game, only 3 games going out there? That's something that's decided by people above me later on. And that's going to be Major League Baseball and going to be networks of what they do, because we need, as a radio crew, we need a video feed of it in order to do it. And if after this season's over, Major League Baseball doesn't produce these video feeds they're doing for us, then something has to be set up. So there's a technological side of it as well. And I think the TV guys want to get there as well. They want their own cameramen there. They want their own angles. There's a lot of variables to it. The NFL, I would think, would be a different case, because the NFL uses a national network broadcast. But baseball, outside of the ESPN games or the Fox games, you got 2 broadcast crews at every single game, 2 physical broadcast TV groups at every game.
Yeah. I could see where it might be confusing a little bit, or at least to start, for announcers to be trying to look at different monitors.
It is. It can be tough to do. And I've actually seen some of the announcers tweet out their setups, and some of them have different setups. And it's an agreement between us and SNY of what we need. They get a few things we need. We get a few things they need. And because we can't have the unlimited coming in. There's only so much bandwidth to be done. And honestly, there's only we can't have that many TVs. But I believe it was Tampa, had this incredible setup on one gigantic TV, had the world feed, the all 9, and all on one. I'm like, boy, how did they get that one? It's each one has their own little customized version. But I think ours has been really, really good for what we've needed it for. And we've had a lot of success with it. Howie's and Wayne are very happy with it. Again, we've got the games on. That's really the big thing. We were looking at a chance of not having any baseball whatsoever last year, and we got through 60 games, and now we're through 20 games, 20-some-odd games this year. Although the Mets seem to get a million rainouts this season and COVID outs, we're behind everybody.
And that division, everybody's about 500 anyway, right?
Yep.
So it's a long season to go yet. But as somebody who's new to this and hasn't worked at that level, I mean, this is a learning experience for me. But just from the little amount of broadcasting and announcing I've done so far, just the feel I get that I love the most about it is being in that position to see everything in front of me and to be able to describe it. And I just don't know what it would be like to be able to, if I could get that same feeling, that same enthusiasm by looking at the monitors. But I got to tell you, the Nesson guys are doing a good job of it. O'Brien, Remy, and Eckersley, I think, have done some of their best work during this period, because they seem to be able to be more storytellers during this time and not so caught up in certain things in the game. They seem less restrained, and it's actually been entertaining listening and viewing in some ways. So I mean, Red Sox radio broadcast, they still sound the same to me. I mean, Joe Castiglione, like you said, has been doing it for so long that I just don't know how long he's going to keep doing it. Probably forever. But I do love what the TV guys are doing. I just still think, though, that if I were one of them, I would be longing to be back in the ballpark. And
every single one of them that I've talked to believe it and say the exact same thing. And that's why I think it will happen. There is something to that effect of being there. You're right. You cannot replicate being in the park on a sold out 42,000 seat stadium with the crowd going nuts and a walk-off home run. You can't have that feeling if you're not there. And, I say that, and I can tell you one of the best calls from last season was in an empty Yankee Stadium when the Mets walked off the Yankees at Yankee Stadium in a game in a doubleheader that they were the home team last year because they had to make up a game from Citi Field, and because there was no crowd, they did a doubleheader at Yankee Stadium, and Howie's call was amazing on it for calling it off a monitor in an empty stadium at another empty stadium. So there's that too, and with the pumped in crowd noise, which was some of the strangest things last year. And they pumped it in all year. By about, I'd say, the 10th or 11th game they got it on. It was off for about the first 10th game that they never got the. But by the 10th or 11th game of the season last year, they had the cheers and everything there. But the one thing you missed, you didn't get any booze. And then we had first game this year when we
you didn't hear an honest representation of what the fans would have been doing. Yeah.
First game this year when we got some kind of a boo, we kind of sat there and said, "Oh, that's what that's like."
I'll tell you, we just got through, as you probably know, here in Massachusetts. We had to have a what they called a wedge season. They stuck football and volleyball in between the winter sports season and the spring sports season because they could not play in the fall. And they got the okay to do it this way. I only did 3 games because we couldn't do road games I do King Philip Regional High School. And we could only do 3 because they only had 3 home games. And the first one in March, 70 degrees and beautiful outside. So we had no complaints whatsoever. And the last game against Franklin, just last Friday, again, nice day, terrific night, no rain, no cold, great time, had fun. The one time I would have really loved to have been inside plexiglass was the second game, which was the week before this past week, where they played Stoughton. It was 36 degrees at game time with, 29 mile per hour gusts coming out of the west, and rain, snow, sleet throughout the whole process of the game. And even though we were inside the press box, the only time they've let us in the press box this year because of COVID restrictions, but they had a heart and let us in because all our electronics would have been killed if not. We had to have the windows open. Of course, it's all coming in on us. And the one benefit, at least to the viewers, would have been that if we had been elsewhere looking at monitors, we would not have been complaining as much as we did about the cold. No. And it was brutal. So, I mean, I think we did the viewers a little bit of a disservice by fully explaining to them how miserable it was to be in those conditions. But the most part, I know I would want to be in the ballpark no matter what. I mean, I would want to be part of the action in that regard.
And you mentioned that, and that's, I always remember doing broadcasting. I did Division III, mostly small college football, and it was the same thing. You were looking at those open air press boxes in most cases. Although I used to, and most people I know, Ed Cohen, who was an Ithaca grad, who is now the play-by-play broadcaster for the New York Knicks on their television, actually on their radio, excuse me. He would always talk to me about, I need to open the elements. I need that because I want to feel it as you're calling the game. And I said, you know what? That's all well and great. When I call the game up in Canton, New York, which is all the way up near the Canadian border against St. Lawrence, they had the best press box in the world where we had our own little broadcast booth. And it was great because it had 2 things. It had a window that closed and it had a heater. and it had a space to put the microphone cord outside, so it sounded like you were outside. And I tell you, I sat there in a nice T-shirt or a shirt like this and called the game in 20-degree weather and windy, all the way up near the Canadian border. So there is that in there. But it's funny you mentioned a funny story that I remember. Bob Papa of the New York Giants, and this is going back to when I was just at WFAN my first year, 1999 actually. And it was Jason Sehorn's first game back after he'd been injured, playing at New England in Foxborough, at old Foxborough Stadium. And I somehow finagled my way in to do parabolics on the field. So that was a riot. Here I am on the field for the Giants radio network, holding the big parabolic microphone on the field. But I always remember this before the game, and Bob's walks in, and he goes up and he looks at the window, and he goes to open the window, and they've got the TV bracket hanging the TV down. You can't open the window at old Foxborough. You couldn't.
Yep.
Guess what he had to do? We had to go into the other booth and actually hold the TV up, unscrew the bracket so we could open the thing up and put it back. I'm in the other room holding the TV up. He's unscrewing. It's two people. He's like, okay, got it. We're going to put the TV back up in there. And after he said, when we're done with this broadcast, get out of here quick. I'm not closing that thing back up. So I'm wondering how long it took somebody to figure out how we ever opened that window up at the old Foxborough. But that was one of my memories there.
I got to tell you, before they rebuilt the press box over there, the original tiny press box that they had such a small location for the broadcasters, TV, radio, you name it, that I don't think that anybody could work in those conditions these days and try to put out a national broadcast. I mean, it was incredible how small that and restricted that whole area was. And the talent had to walk right through past all of us ink-stained wretches in the press box to get to it. It was my first meeting with Howard Cosell, of all people. We could talk for 5 hours about memories like that, but I do want to take it back a little bit to the financial aspect, and I'll sort of kind of tie it in with my own experience a little bit, although I'm sure it's a lot different. Before the pandemic and while I was still gainfully employed, the newspaper stopped sending me to road games after about 35 years of traveling across the nation, and I was ordered to write columns about road games from what I saw on television. Now, I hated doing that because I thought it was unethical to be writing something that carried the implication I was there covering it, even though I tried to make it clear that I was not at the location. And it just went up my backside the wrong way. I'm surprised I didn't get canned because of my reactions to the order. But now everybody's doing that. This year, the Boston Globe was the only paper in New England that sent a writer on the road with the Patriots. The only paper. The Herald didn't. None of the other papers. Of course, most of the other papers around here are now owned by the same outfit. They're owned by what is now Gannett. And so they get one guy writing for the entire group instead of, 12 papers all sending their own people. And I just, and not only are you watching on television and you're not getting the multiple screens that anybody else, you're seeing what NBC or CBS or Fox are putting on the air. And then they also, the only contact they had with the players was those Zoom conferences that they would have afterwards. So that was strictly controlled and monitored by the Patriots. So it was a bean counting aspect in my newspaper's decision. And I know that there's far more income and there are far more aspects to decision making at a larger operation. But I still get scared that this might become more of the norm than not. You know what I'm saying? Is that
I will agree on the fact that they're doing Zoom meetings and all this there with no locker room access, with no player access. Sending a reporter on the road, whether it be our beat reporter, whether it be any of the New York paper beat reporters, it really doesn't make sense because they're not able to go before the game to get the pregame conference. They're not doing that. So that's why once those things reopen again, the reporters especially have got to get back in there. We're missing stories. We're missing things. That will, I think, be back. And that will lead to everything else being back. slowly. Will it be right away? But that is my biggest reason why I think few people have kind of sat there and said, oh, we got to hurry back. When we go on the road, we wouldn't be traveling with a team. We'd have to travel on our own because the way we're not tier 3 or tier 1, depending on whatever one it is there. So that's one reason. There's no reason to travel right now because we would not be with the team. And you're not going to have access at the hotel. I mean, you're not going to have access running into somebody at dinner. I mean, that's how, that as a reporter, when you get a personal relationship with a player, hey, you caught them walking out of the locker room. You walked them out to the car. You see them at a local area and you talk to them. That doesn't happen now because the players they're not in a bubble, and they're becoming more personal now. People see them around, but they're still not doing any one-on-ones with the reporters. And until that happens, there's no reason to be sending reporters or broadcasters out if everything's going to be videoed on a Zoom meeting. And I can't argue with that. Now, when they open the locker rooms back up and you see reporters traveling and there's post-game availability, then I think that's when you have to get the people back on the road.
Now, I'm assuming that most pro teams will return to normal. But I'll tell you one thing. If there's one man who thought that this last 57, 58, 59 weeks was a dream come true, it was Bill Belichick, because his disdain for the media and knowing now that they were in a position where they could absolutely shut us out was, I would have to say that he'd probably be giddy about that. And I know he would probably groan and say, well, I'll just do what the league is telling me to do. But I hope he appreciated this year for the respite he got from the media, because it's something that I think he wished for all 20 years of his tenure in Foxborough. And he finally got that wish.
Which is funny,
at a terrible cost, of course. But
which is funny, but I haven't noticed, and especially in New York, and I'm not just talking about with Mets, I'm talking Yankees, I'm talking everything. The New York media on Zoom has not let down at all in their badgering and questioning, no matter what it is. They're still tough on anyone. I mean, poor Aaron Boone with the Yankees right now, the way they are. He's getting it from every single corner, and it's never an issue that even on a Zoom meeting, ask these tough questions. I mean, I've heard other ones as well. Kind of just the second the game's over, it's like here come the Wolves on Zoom. The only difference. So I think that they're dying to get back out there and in person, but the New York media especially has had no problem continuing that. So Bill's probably very happy he's not with the Giants right now.
But I have to ask you a quick question now. Now that you're one of the major domos at WCBS and in their news department as well, does the network news radio get out of the same building that you're in?
No, in fact, even though we're still WCBS, but we are no longer tied in directly to the CBS company. In fact, a few years ago, we did a rebranding. We're WCBS 880. You'll notice a lot of our logo, we don't have the CBS bug anymore, so we're still that. But we are still a CBS radio affiliate and a partner. So we still have Stephen Portnoy on during the day. We have all the CBS, any of them from the White House. So we do have a strong connection to the CBS television side of it, and with WCBS TV2 here in New York as well. But we're no longer owned by CBS, so it is mixed there. That used to be out of Broadcast House, which is on 57th Street. Yep. In fact, we were there at one time before we moved as well. So once everything moved down to Hudson Street, that's when it started to kind of separate. And then when Entercom bought, which is now Odyssey, bought the CBS radio, it slowly separated apart. But we still have an amazing relationship with them, and they're our primary national news carrier.
So what you're telling me, though, Ray, is that there's no way that you could have helped me meet Nora O'Donnell.
Actually, she cut some promos for us. So next time if I'm in the day that we're cutting the promos, I'm going to send her a message. I get if somebody who wants to meet me. So we'll see if we can take care
pull
of
that off. My God, there won't be enough cups that I can send you for that. Honest to God, I mean, it's a running joke here, but yes, I do have a major crush on Nora O'Donnell. I respect her as a professional. I don't want anything to be thought of other than that. But I am glad she is anchoring the national news. I watched her I remember watching her when she was at MSNBC early in her career, well, actually with NBC News, but she would get stuff put on there, reports on and the like. And I've always kind of been impressed by her, and her husband is the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Anyway, one last question for you. You've told me, of course, and you mentioned it earlier, that you've done some play-by-play work in the past. You mentioned to me a while back that you had done some games at Army, if I'm not mistaken. And now that our mutual friend Missy Traversi is the head coach of the women's basketball team at West Point, is there any chance we'll have a Bishop Feian connection behind the microphone there as well?
Well, I've talked to my good friend Rich DeMarco, who is the assistant athletic director there and head of broadcasting, and I said, Rich, and I have done at least 2 Army women's games a year for the last 10 years, except for this past year when there wasn't any. I did 2 last year before the pandemic, and I said to him, Rich, I haven't begged you for much in a while. I need a few of these this year, okay? So find a spot for me here. And he said, don't worry, we'll find a spot for you next year. I promise you. So I don't know if I'll get 1 or 2 or there, but he has at least made me feel pretty good that I'll get 1 or 2, and I'm looking forward to it. So
you let me know if you get a game, and I'll try my best to get out there if they let fans in the place, and I would be more than happy. Obviously, I promised Missy I'm going to come out there.
Crystal Arena is great. Have you ever been to West Point?
I have not.
It is an incredible place. I've called basketball there. I've called ice hockey badly there. As you mentioned, that's the toughest thing there. I've done baseball there, which was a lot of fun, and even lacrosse and soccer. So I did a bunch of things before, but I still fill in occasionally for basketball. It's the only thing I do and I did a couple games, like I said, 2 years ago before the pandemic. And it was with Dave McGarity, who was very, very just a really, really good man. And it's I'm glad to see they've kind of gone right back. I first did Army games the year before Maggie Dixon came in, and I was fortunate enough to be about 5, 6, 7 games during Maggie's year. And that was such a tragic loss, losing her that summer.
Yes,
but it's one of the highlights of my entire broadcasting. Is I got to call a game up at the Hartford Civic Center when they played UConn. And Kara Enright was our star player at that time. She was All-American. They actually went to the NCAA that year. She's a real good player, and they've had a couple other good players who've even been better than her since. But she was their next big player. She was a heck of a player. And they're playing UConn, and they got to go up and play Gino at Hartford during break. And you got 12,000 people at the Civic Center. And Gino just wants to come out and end this thing. Yeah. And I'm telling you, they kept this game to a 6-7 point game until the 6-minute mark of the second half. And then they went on their run, and it ended up being about a 8-point game. Kara had a great game. She had about 25 points, I think, a real good game. And Maggie comes over and sits down for the post-game interview, and we're talking there. And she's obviously dejected. And I turned to her, I said, well, I know it's a loss. I know it's tough, but for 30 minutes, you kept 12,000 people in the stands. And Gino wanted to get these people home early because it's New Year's Eve. They want to get home. And you had them worrying for quite some time. And not a lot of people can do that here at UConn and keep them in the game. Yeah, you didn't win, but your team learned a lot tonight. And she stopped and she said, you know what? I never thought of it that way. You actually cheered me up a little bit. And we laughed. I said, well, you got some other big ones coming up. Good luck. And I didn't have any more in the rest of the schedule. They made the NCAA tournament that year. And of course, they ended up playing Tennessee and Pat Summitt in the first round. And that was another game where they were not going to win that game, unfortunately. I mean, I still think they had one of the Meeks, either Shamiqua Holsclaw or one of them there at that point. But they were a really, really good team. And then, a few months later, she passed away. So one of the highlights was getting to kind of make her smile after a loss, and I always loved being part of the Army games, and that's one of my big memories up there. And it'd be really cool to get to interview a fellow Feian graduate after the game. So I'm hoping to get a chance to.
Keep my fingers crossed. Ray, I'm going to end this with a quote from the story I wrote about you a few years back. When we had some time to talk about your entire career and how you were doing, and then obviously changes since. But there's one thing that at the end of this that kind of it's kind of underscores everything, I think, a little bit. Your quote was, "It sounds corny, but it is really cool every time when at the end of the game and they're doing the credits, I hear them say, the executive producer of Mets baseball is Ray Martel. Every time, it gives me goosebumps. Is it still that way?
Absolutely, 100%. I even got Wayne Randazzo to say the second time later in the postgame, so I'm even better now.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Ray Martel, executive producer of Mets broadcasts on WCBS in New York. Ray, thanks so much for joining me here on the Owner's Box. I promise I'll have the commemorative coffee mug out to you shortly. And thanks for joining me. And like I said, if you're doing any Army games this year, let me know. I'll show up.
Hey, you show up, and the only thing I want is one of those newspaper things that says "I beat Fearless." That's the only thing. Okay.
I found a shirt in my garage the other day, if you can believe it.
Oh, those are the days.
Yes, they were. Thanks again, Ray. You take care.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
All righty. And that was my good friend Ray Martel. Interesting stuff, as always. We'll be back after these words from our friends in the land of the rising sun with a quick wrap-up and some coming attractions.
ジーンズが好きだ。本物を見極める。情熱で生み出す。自分だけのたった一つがある。ジーンズの惑星ライトオン。
And welcome back to the Owner's Box after dark, as the Hugh Hefner pipe would indicate. Very quickly, I just want to thank again Ray Martel. What a great job he did tonight. And just to let you know, a quick little coming attraction here. Our next episode of the Owner's Box After Dark is going to be something very, very special. It is going to be cooking with Mark. Now, I know I promised you a little bit of an explanation of how I make my ersatz southern pork barbecue sandwiches. Well, the other night when I made a delicious batch of barbecue pork on my grill here at Fulton Pond Studios in Mansfield, Massachusetts, I videoed. I took video of it, and I hope I got it all right. I think there might be a couple of times I had the camera pointed the wrong way, or the iPhone, actually. So we will endeavor to make sure it's all put together correctly, and if it's not put together correctly, I'll just film some other stuff, and you'll never know the difference, okay? So next week, you will get to see what it's like to try to make some pork barbecue that is reminiscent of this little barbecue stand that I used to visit when I was in my preteen years in the little hamlet of Williston, Florida. This place was called Frog's Place, and they made the most unforgettable, authentic Southern barbecue that I have ever had in my life. And since I don't have the patience to use a smoker or anything like that, I just figured I could find a way to make something that tasted somewhat like it. And I did come upon it, and you will see. The only thing I can't do for you in the upcoming video is have you taste it. So you'll have to watch what I'm doing and then try to make it yourself, maybe. I do want to thank you all for visiting tonight. Thanks again to the guys here at Duck and Cover Productions and to everybody who watches these on YouTube, which, again, you can subscribe to my channel and see these whenever you want. It doesn't cost you a penny. I would also say if you would like to send me some email, let me know how I'm doing, you can send me that at theownersbox2020@gmail.com. You can send me snail mail at The Owner's Box, Post Office Box 272, Mansfield, Massachusetts 02048. And you should check out my website, which this week went over 30,000 hits. 30,000 hits. I now have more hits. I now have 10 times more. I have 20 times more hits. No, not quite that many. I never was good at math, but I have an awful lot more hits than my former newspaper sells newspapers these days. So yeah, keep checking it out. I've got good stuff up there, and also an updated schedule of spring sports coverage for North TV with myself and my broadcast partner for baseball and softball, Glenn Farley, and for boys volleyball, my friend Alex Salaki. As I keep telling you all the time, please use it. We're still not out of the woods yet. And wash your hands. Watch out what you're doing in crowds. I know they've lessened the restrictions on masks, but I still feel safer when I'm wearing one in a crowd, in public. If I'm going to be strolling out in the woods by myself, no, I won't wear one. Although, as I've told you, my allergies are such that maybe I would be better off if I did. But just please, do everything you can. Let's keep knocking these numbers down. We're almost at that point where we can start to think that maybe, just maybe, we can get back to normal. And wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it? Again, thank you so much. Please stay safe, be happy, do everything you can to help out your neighbor. And good night, everybody.